Howdy do. So for today's weekly Jinx video, we do a weekly Jinx video every Wednesday on this channel about anything to do with Jinx, and you decide that topic in the comment section down below, as well as this video acting as a discussion thread video on the Jinx subreddit, League of Jinx, so feel free to go check that out as well. And finally, after a preseason, we get to go back to this type of video idea that we've been doing every 2 weeks for the past year, in which case we give our expectations and advice for how we feel Jinx is going to be in the coming patch. Advice for new Jinx players or people looking up to pick Jinx this patch, as well as just our expectations, like what do we think the meta build's going to be? Is that going to change or not? Is it going to be the same? Is Jinx going to be way more powerful, way more weaker? And of course, in patch 8.2 is the attack speed Q buff. It's a revert of the Season 5 nerf that kind of started her being taken out of pro play, if you will. And what I'll do here is I'll kind of summarize what you guys' thoughts were across the subreddit or the comment section and stuff like that. Because for some people, you actually felt like nothing at all would change, and that's kind of fine, because maybe there's a chance that her rocket launcher was what was more prominent or more annoying or more broken about her, if you will, and since that's not getting changed and it's just the minigun this time, because of its short range and how risky it can be on a champion that can be already unsafe if you don't, hit the flame chompers in the right spot or don't have flash, it might mean that, yeah, when you are successful, you're very successful because you'll shove down objectives with your minigun, but your range still kind of really won't be there to take advantage of as much because the rocket form isn't, reverted either. And that's intentional, of course. They do want some counterplay to be there with Jinx. Obviously, she got nerfed in Season 5 for a reason because she was powerful, so if they just reverted everything, they'd just be going right back to that initial problem, and they don't want to do that, of course. Second thing I want to talk about, the attack speed per level, because this wasn't entirely clear to me until I talked to August again, and they added that attack speed per level thing, like in other words, not just on her minigun, but just all 18 levels, because of the nerfs she was originally getting back in 5.10 to the minigun that put it in the state it's been now for almost 3 years. Well, they're taking that away, actually, so there's no more attack speed scaling per level, it's just all in the minigun when you level up the minigun now. So it's also very important to max the minigun, like most people kind of already were, sure, but like that was added to kind of counterbalance out how much attack speed you were losing when she got nerfed way back then, so that the nerf wasn't too hard on her. And so now that's kind of gone. Some people actually feel like she will be more powerful, but she won't actually be top tier. And I think that is probably where I stand a little bit too. I don't actually think, the way the meta is right now especially, I don't necessarily see her rocketing off and just being the best AD carry out of nowhere. Vayne is getting nerfed, but I think Vayne's still alright, Zaya's still alright, Tristana and Twitch are still alright, but I do think Jinx can now be up there in the conversation, at least in pro play, if people are like, well, this champion's banned. Pro play started for this past weekend, for a matter of fact, and in some games you had like 4 or 5 AD carries being banned, and I do think it puts Jinx in a spot where they're like, hey, if we make a comp either around Jinx or that Jinx at least has some peel in it, she can actually be successful right now. We can actually just shove objectives down when we group at like 15 minutes. The whole classic Nunu Azir mid kind of thing where he blood boils those two champions and you just go around back in Season 5 knocking down towers. Speaking of, on a side note, Nunu did get buffed, and Azir isn't really bad right now, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of comp come back. Probably not, but it might, because a Nunu actually now, when he blood boils people, will give them 40% AP by the late game. So something like Azir, getting blood boiled for the attack speed and now getting 40% AP, and then you have a Jinx as well, and you got a couple Mountain Drakes, Baron even. That might just be a way to shove out and close a game really early, actually, for what is supposed to be late game champions. But however, that's another thing I want to talk about before I get into the final expectations, is that ultimately this change was for pro play and like higher elos more so than anything else, but not because Jinx was weak. It was never because her attack speed was ever low or something like that. It was more so just giving Jinx a reason, and Jinx players something to be dangerous with, something to come online with if they're being successful, and as such then be able to use that success to impact the game a bit more. So in other words, if you are Jinx and you're playing Jinx and you got a couple kills in lane and you're snowballing or whatever, now you can use the minigun to actually, like I said, shove down objectives and actually be like, hey, we can't afford to leave the enemy Jinx that's kind of fed alone, because she'll take a bunch of objectives for us if we do. She has to be a priority. Well, on live right now, it's not that that necessarily isn't the case, but if you do get a lead in lane, depending on the matchup and depending on the enemy comp, they kind of don't have to worry about you. It's going to take you a second to take down an objective, versus how she used to back in Season 5 anyway. Which then goes to our final expectations. Some people actually feel this change won't matter at all, And I don't know if it won't matter at all, because again, in Season 5, they had to nerf this for a reason. She was prominent in pro play. She did have like 200 games in professional play, as a matter of fact, where she was picked or banned. So I do think it will impact somewhat, but I'm not going to deny that those guys' arguments exist, because they feel, or at least some of those people feel, that it's a meta thing still. The meta is still in such a way, and the champions that are better than Jinx are still better than Jinx, that yeah, now she's an option, but she will probably only be an option if a lot of other things are banned. She's not going to be, hey, Jinx is now the top tier to carry. Final note, Glacial Augment actually did get buffed, and even though it might not have been the best and highest win rate keystone on Jinx, it was something people were starting to use on Jinx even in higher elos, and between Jinx getting buffed quite a bit and Glacial Augment getting buffed, you might see that as a niche pick. Some people feel in solo, not solo queue, but pro play, more so than solo queue. But it might be okay in solo queue to try it out if you want, if you feel confident enough that you don't need the other keystones. But in general, some people are like, that seems like now it will be a thing, but probably more so in pro play where there's more coordination and stuff than in solo queue. So, I'm going to actually end this video with a clip of August Browning describing the goals that was originally set for this Jinx buff, why it was a thing. The reason I am kind of reposting this, if you will, is because I did post this before a couple days ago. Maybe not a lot of people saw it that will see this video, and as such, you'll be able to hear from the kit designer themselves why they feel these changes were kind of a necessary thing, something they wanted to do and are gonna keep an eye on to make sure Jinx isn't permaban or too powerful if she needs follow-up buffs. But that's all for this video from me. So in the comment section down below, let's do what we always do every 2 weeks. Get some advice for new Jinx players that might want to play the champion, wondering what the buff is about. If you have something, you see a person commenting that they're struggling with something and you're in a elo or something that you know the answer to, perhaps answer that and we can help each other out as a community here. But that's all for this video. I don't know which video will be next, because life be quite a mess. So until this time, take care from the Fire Guy FS. Thank you for watching, and now here's the clip from August himself.
Some people fear the Jinx buff will mean going back to the times when you lose a tower if you recall against her in lane. Yeah, that's true, Get Jinxed. If you recall against new Jinx and she has a few items, you'll lose your tower. That's correct. So I suggest you beat her in lane first. Like, honestly, that's the purpose of this buff, is we're saying, like, hey, what does Jinx do? She takes your objectives. She's not very safe, so if you're there, she's going to have a hard time doing it, but if you leave her alone and she's even, like, bad things are going to happen to you. That's kind of the point of this buff. Because, like, right now, like, after she lost long-range rockets, she didn't have much going for her. In terms of, like, you compare the other hyper carries, it's like Vayne turns on and really fast, and she's reliable late game, so is Tristana. Kog'Maw, he gets one item and he can just solo anybody as long as he has, like, a support with him. So we're looking at Jinx and we're saying, like, what's something that she can do that, like, says, like, hey, if you're Jinx and you're winning, there's actually a payoff here. This actually makes you dangerous earlier in the game. Because we found that just making hyper carries strong late game and weak early game is, like, not as effective as we'd like it to be, and in Jinx's case, she isn't even that strong late game because of how unsafe she is. So even if you do get ahead on Jinx, you're always still having to work for it in a way that you don't have to work for it with, like, a Kog'Maw or a Tristana. Well, not a Kog'Maw, like, or a Twitch or a Tristana or a Vayne. So we were hoping to give Jinx something else that she can, like, be like, okay, this is why Jinx is dangerous in the average game, and it's because if you leave her alone, she'll take your objectives, and so you have to pay attention to her. We'll see, though. Maybe it's a terrible idea. Suyan, what I mean by solo anyone, yes, solo anyone as long as he has support with him, lol. What I mean is Kog'Maw, like, gets one item and he hits the I can kill anybody threshold, which you'd expect to be, like, later for a lot of hyper carries, or carries in general, but, like, Kog'Maw, like, hits, it's like, guy gets a freaking recurve bow and he's like, yo, dog, I'm really, really dangerous now. And it's like, what? What about a League of Legends Classic server? Oh god. It would take so much work to get League of Legends back to what it used to be, and no one wants Twisted Fate AoE stunning with gold cards. Yeah, Get Jinx, that's my biggest worry, is, like, how much do we have to nerf her to get her there? My hope is that not a lot. We've already nerfed her by, like, 5 AD, so we'll see where that puts her, and if she needs more nerfs, we'll follow up.